We begin the current Daf, Mesech Bava Metzia Daf Chav Gimel. We begin 8 lines down at the top of the Yomid, where we are in the middle of a conversation with a machlokes. It's actually a two-way machlokes between Rabba and Rava. We had a case in the Mishnah of Krichos b'Rishus Rabim. Said if there's small bundles in the street, you could keep it. So there's a machlokes is that even by somebody that has a simon, or only somebody that does not have a simon. The one Rabba says even somebody has a simon. So the Gemara says, when it has a simon, why could you keep it? Obviously, he holds simon asla daris. It's going to get trampled on. It's not a simon. Rabba says, no, it's only somebody that does not have a simon. If it had a simon, you would have to call it up because they hold simon asla daris have a simon. And then l'shitasam, as Taish explains, he has to hold. It actually goes from the other way around. But if mokim is a simon or not, that's also machlekes. That Rabba holds mokim is not a simon, and Rabba holds mokim is a simon. The Gemara continues trying to bring a raya to these two different opinions, Rabba and Rabba, regarding if simon hasla daris is a simon or not. Put him for everyone. Someone discussing today's daf is simon hasla daris. This concept of if you have a sign, identifying feature, but it could be trampled on. Would we consider that as someone relying on that to say, hey, I have a simon, or he's like, hey, I probably got stepped on? You're not to pass by food items. Simon regarding if it's simon that it could have been something that happened by itself. We don't have to necessarily assume that the guy had done it. Mishkol mido minyan have a simon is weight or measurement or metrics is numbers. Is that a simon? Chaticha shabasa regarding if you find a piece of meat, do you say that okay, every piece of meat is cut the same way? The mishkala deshavim has equal weights. Chaticha gufa. How about the way it's sliced? Simon bepaska that is a sign in the mini chaticha gufa is like where in the animal is to cut from, and Simon bepaska is like is how you cut the actual piece itself. Tvias eina, the halacha of could you give back something to someone that he just recognizes it, he has a recognition. Kliyam Puria was mentioned in the Mishnah regarding en Piraya that there's nothing inherently here that could be an indicator that you could recognize that it's yours. And regarding the Tzurm Rabbana, Tamachachim, the halacha is Kelim Chadashon Shlo, about an idol, let's presume a Tamachachim, we rely on him. But if it's a new vessel that the eye cannot be satiated, that there's no simon, so that's that the person can't, there's no way of saying that it's yours. So we get the current daf, like we said in the previous daf, simon asla dar. So a person finds a lost item that does have a simon, but it was found in the area where people are bound to trample and it ruined the simon. So it was left on the street. Even if he had a simon, the way it was knotted. But Rabba holds not a simon. You could keep it because the owner was miyash since assumes that simon is going to be ruined. Rabba says it is a simon because it's not miyash since the item does have a simon. So that's machlokes between Rabba and Rava, and that's what the Gemara continues to try to bring a raya. Toshima. The Gemara brings 8 lines down at the top of the Yomid. We learned in the halacha of our Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Kikarais shal nachtem. Someone finds loaves of bread from a baker specifically, because the bakery, they make it all the same. So, Harei Shalai. You find a loaf of bread in the street, there's no way of identifying it, you can keep it. Now, the inference is, Hashabala buys, but let's say the Vabel made her special, her spelt sourdough, geflochten, whatever, chalas. Oh, then chayav lahachris. Then you have to call it out because it's unique. Everyone makes it their own way. Now, Rashi just points out, says even though there's a mefurish in the Mishnah, the next Mishnah says explicitly, we're being a diuk from our Mishnah that we said that shall nachtim you could keep, but shall balabayis that you have to call it. It's a Mishnah. It's a mefurish Mishnah. The next Mishnah, the contrast with our Mishnah says Rashi, yeah, but once we already asked on the previous daf, we asked from the first questions we asked. We also mentioned from the halacha of our Mishnah regarding krichos b'Rishus Rabim, which that's what actually was the discussion we were talking about regarding the bundles in the street. That we asked on Rava, so then we ask on Rabba also from a dika of the Reisha, meaning from our Mishnah, but really it's a mefurish Mishnah. Okay, that's a parenthetical. But says the Gemara, okay, wait a second. Shabala bais my timer. Why is it when it's a privately owned, when it was an individually made challah, that you have to call it out? Okay, keeping this pusimon because she made it like this. She said I braided I tucked under the last dough and I put it under. I know there was a little bump there in the bottom. Okay, they made the idea that that rifted in that you could tell that everyone makes their bread the way they make it. Now the thing is, but the Mishnah does not differentiate in the next Mishnah, which the dig from our Mishnah, whether it's in this private domain or in the public domain. You go out and take it out. Wait a second, it's in the street. You see that even though people are walking, someone's going to step on her challah, it still have a simon. It's a simon. So you have to the Rabba that refutes Rabba. Rabba said it's not a simon. Rabba, I would tell you that no. Hasam over there, the loaves of a private person, high in the time, and the reason why it's going to be a simon is mishum de'im avirin ala oichlin. That's for a very different reason. That's because a person would not. So Rashi explains that mavirin doesn't mean stepping on it. Doesn't mean people will not. You don't step on food. It's like the terminology in Masechet Yomei mavirin ala mitzvahs, which means that you can't pass by a mitzvah. So if someone finds food on the road, you're not allowed to pass by and leave it over there. That's why you won't get stepped on, because whoever finds it will pick it up. So imavin don't mean you probably read it like, oh, don't step over the food. No, it means you can't pass by without picking it up. So no one's going to end up stepping on it. So the guy will know that since he has a simon, so he could identify it. But says the non-Jews who would step on the food, and therefore the owner should be miyayish. So says the Gemara, the non-Jews, they're concerned for some type of witchcraft, sorcery. They think that, oh, why'd someone leave a loaf of bread? That must be some bad omen or whatever, some type of witchcraft to make those who step on it, stumble. So although they're not going to lift it up, Rashi explains, but they're not going to step on it because of kishuv, and therefore it'll be there, and then the first yid will pick it up. Again, the simon will remain, even though generally simon al-sados is not a simon. Says Gemara, but there's animals, there's dogs. They're going to step in there. They're going to do whatever it is on the thing. It's going to get ruined. Says no, but you're right. You have to say it's talking about a place where it's not common that there's animals or dogs. But you're right. If there were, then we would say that it would not be a simon. Says okay, Lema, let us say that this machlekes between Rabba and Rabba regarding simon asladaris, let's say it's ketanoi, it's a machlekes tanoim. What's a machlekes? Because we said in our Mishnah the following machlekes. We said that Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol dover sheyesh bo shinoi. Anything that has a shinoi, something different about it, chayav lahachris, said you have to call it out. So what's the case of this? So the Mishnah said, Motzi igel b'teicha cheres. Let's say you find a round cake of figs, and inside you find a earthenware shard. Or kikar b'teicha, and you can't sue Coca-Cola for the fact that you found the earthenware shard. And there's something with mud on the inside. You started biting into a date, and you're like, a piece of earthenware in here. Or kikar b'teicha mais. There's a loaf of bread, and you find money inside. That one you're not complaining about. But mechlal, the inference is like this. That was Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah. Now, if Rabbi Yehuda is saying it, the inference is that there's a Tana Kama, there's a first Tana that disagrees. And Sabra holds, no, Harei l'shalai. You could keep it. So, okay, this is one of those Gemaras that you have to is variables and there's assumptions. And the Gemara is saying what we assume to say that this is a machlekes, then we say no, not necessarily. Those variables are presumptions that could be not true. Which is, so Savaru, they thought like this, that there was two assumptions we made. First of all, the Kuliyama that everyone holds Simna Bami Elov. What does it mean, Simna Bami Elov? It means to say that if it's a simon that could have came by itself, like for example, the middle of producing the figs and a piece of earthenware, sometimes can fall in when you're making the round cake, or you're making the challah dough and your kids are playing around with the coins, the Chanukah geld, the Purim geld, and it falls into the thing. That still have a simon, meaning we say that no, it was deliberately put in over there as a simon. It didn't fall in by itself, and it's something that's considered that has a simon. Okay, that was one presumption we had. Additionally, another presumption we had was umavir nalaychlin, that people would pass by food without picking it up. Okay, if that's the case, so what's the machlokes? My love, isn't it, if you find a round cake of figs and it has inside a piece of earthenware, and you're saying that the halacha of the Tana Kama is going to be that you could keep it, and you're just saying that you cannot, my love, on the third variable, that must be what they're disagreeing about. Marsa Tana Kama held, will have a simon. You could keep it, because they hold people would, like we said, everyone's assuming that you could walk by it, and therefore if you could walk by it, then people will end up stepping on it by mistake, like Rabbah. That's how the Tana Kama holds, because similar Asladaris is lo have a simon. But Marsa Yehuda held that no, have a simon, meaning that even though it could be people would step on it, like Rabbah, it's still a simon. So seemingly that's what they're disagreeing about. Says no, not necessarily. Now each one is going to have. It's also a little bit technical about how we're coming to answer and what the version is. There's different versions of this. That each one, Rabba and Rabba, are going to explain how you could explain the machlekes that they're all according to his opinion. So Rava, like we said, holds that Saman Asladares is a simon. So he says no. It's not true. You can't say that me and you, Rabba and Rava, are machlekes of Tana Kama and Rabbi Yehuda. You know why? If you were thinking to say the Kasaba Tanakama, the Tanakama holds like Rabbah, not like me. Oh, I'm Rabbi Yehuda and he's Tanakama. No. If the Tanakama like Rabbah, that Siman Asla Daris loy have a Siman, like Rabbah, that if it's something that can be trampled, it's not a Siman. And like you're saying, everyone assumes that people would walk by food and therefore it could get trampled. So then I have the following question for you. When it comes to the loaves of a private person in the street, which again, remember, people you're saying are ma'avir naloichlin, they would walk by without picking it up. Therefore, it's asl daris, it could get trampled on. And you're telling me Tanakama holds that siman asl daris is not a siman, right? So then why? Why in the Mishnah of Chafim and Alf, that what we call the sefer of our Mishnah, the halacha by Balabai says you have to call it out. Why would you have to call it out? It's asl daris. It's not going to be a siman. Ella rather, he explains the machlekes in the Mishnah. Again, this is for Rava in a different way, not in the machlekes Rava and Rava. Rather, Amr Zvin Mishmin did Rava, and again, this is in the name of Rava because we want to be miyashav Rava's shita that he holds that it would be a siman. The Kuli Amasavi everyone holds like me. Simnas Ladaris, variable number 1 regarding something that could be trampled on, have a siman. It's still going to be a siman, like Rava. Everyone holds like that. Variable number 2, Umavina Loichlin. Yeah. And people would walk by food without picking it up. And even so, Kikarishal Balabais, you would have to call out. You know why? Very simple. Because Siman Asladaris is a siman. Even though they would walk by and even step on it, that doesn't take away the fact that the guy will rely on his siman. So what's the pshat v'hacha? What's the machlekes of here regarding the eagle, the round cake of figs? That's on the third variable. Which you assuming everyone holds that Siman Abama Elav is a siman? No, that's the machlekes. So Tanakh Masaba, he said Siman Abama Elav will have a siman. Meaning, you could presume that this happened by mistake. The guy didn't deliberately put cheres inside his right. It fell in. So that's not a siman. You don't have to think that a guy put it deliberately over there, and that's why Harei L'Shalai. No, it is going to a siman, and therefore it's chayav lahachris. That's how Rava, Rav Zvid Mishmei the Rava would explain it. Not for Rabba Malacha. Again, Rabba is going to now explain everything according to the way he sees it. No, the Kulam everyone holds like me. Siman Asladar is variable number 1, that's something that could be trampled, loya, but something that's not a siman. Okay. And everyone holds not like we assume. And you would not walk by food without picking it up. So what's the machlekes? Number 3. Again, because if they did walk by, then there wouldn't be any chance of it being a siman, because if it would be mavrin aloichlin, and he holds siman asadaris lab a siman, people would step on it, then it wouldn't be a siman. So no one could hold that it's a siman. So rather, similar to asadaris is not a siman, people would not walk by without picking it up, and therefore it would retain the siman. But and he holds, yes, the same thing that Rava said, he just had to say a little different to get there. And the machlekes regarding is something that comes by itself. Tanakama holds it not a siman, says not a siman. So again, Harei L'Shalai. Maybe the Saba have a siman, it is a siman. So as Rashi explains, here the reason of Rabbi Yehuda is because he holds that people would not walk by. If they wouldn't walk by, they're not going to step in, it. So if it's a siman above ma'ila b'siman, it's going to be a siman. Now the Tanakama also holds imavirin, and that's why at least by kikurash balabais you would have to call it out. But the reason by eagle is simply because it's a siman above ma'ila, and that's not a siman. If you hold it is a siman, so that's according to Rabbah. Now, ikadami, there are those that say that when we said lemiketanoi, it wasn't on the machlekes Rabbah and Rava of a siman asladaris. It was on the halacha of imavirin ala oichlin. That let's say there's a machlekes tanoim if we are mavar ala oichlin or not. So that's what the ikadami is saying. So again, we're going through the discussion again. So Brew, they thought to say, okay, variable number 1. The kulam, according to everyone, siman siman that comes by itself is a siman. And the siman asladar is variable number 2. Lab siman meaning they're like Rabbah. A siman that would be trampled on, it's not going to be a siman because the guy's thinking he probably got ruined. My love, isn't it that the machlekes regarding the round cake of figs and you find inside of it the cheres must be the disagreeing regarding, well, would a guy walk by food without picking it up? So in other words, would it become lidaris or not? Meaning everyone holds if it's us lidaris like Rabbah that it's not a siman. Question, would it come to that? Oh, so the Maras of Tani Kama held, yeah, mavir. People would walk by without picking it up, and therefore that's why it's not going to be a siman and Harei L'Shalai because it's going to get trampled on. Marshal, who the hell that no emavir and that you would not walk by, if it's not going to get trampled, and therefore, even though it happened by itself, since everyone holds siman abama elav is a siman, meaning even though it might have been by itself at least, and therefore that's why he holds that chayav lahachris, you have to call it out. Now, similarly, the Gemara, as rejected in the first version, again, Rava has to answer for himself because the Gemara is assuming that the machlekes was if mavin al or not. But in that presumption, one of the variables was like Rabbah, that siman asl daras is not a siman. So on that, Zid Mishmei Rava, he has to reject and to say no, because he holds siman asl daras is a siman. So he has to reject this. Again, remember, we're in the Ikad Amri now, so we're really repeating what we said. So he says, no, Isa Gedat, if you think to say Sabatan Kama holds siman asl daras lab a siman, like Rabbah, not like me, that a siman that could get trampled on is not a siman. And he holds that you would pass right out picking it up, as we mentioned, and that's why it's Ariel Shalai. Fine, that works very well for this case of the Eagle Shadavela. But I have a difficulty for you, which on the next Mishnah, Daf Chafei, that those are people you're saying they would walk by without picking it up, and therefore it's going to get trampled, and therefore it shouldn't have a siman. So my machris, why does the Mishnah say you have to call it out? It's going to get trampled. So Ella, rather, obviously it's not what you're saying. And then the Kulam is everyone holds siman asl daras have him like Rava. A siman that could get trampled on is a siman. And the people would walk by without picking it up. So that doesn't make a difference. It would still be a siman. So then what's the machlekes? Again, like we said before, it's regarding if a siman that might have come by itself. Do we presume that to be a siman or not? So Tani comes over here, holds siman a siman that if it could have come by itself, so we're not thinking that I put deliberately money inside a challah, so it's going to be a siman. Rabbi Yehuda holds no, have a siman. It is going to be a siman, and therefore you would have to call it out. Whereas Rabbi, again, Rabbi has to go now to his opinion. He would tell you no. The kulam according to everyone siman asl daras lem siman. No, if it's something that might be trampled, it's not a siman like Rabbi, and therefore you would have to say ve'ein mavir naloichlin. Again, because if you'd be mavir naloichlin, then people would step on it, and then it wouldn't be a siman according to anyone. And we're having a machlekes if the kikar shel devela are a siman or not. So we have to say that no, and people would not walk by without picking it up. So what's the machlekes? Machlekes regarding a siman that comes by itself. That by itself, meaning if it might have come by itself, it's not a siman. It is, again, that was a very long way of discussing this machlekes between Rabba and Rava when we were saying this machlekes in our Mishnah regarding kikar shel devela, which we were assuming and we were inferring that this machlekes that Tanakama disagrees with that halacha, holds Hadei Shaloi. Not like Rabbi Yehuda holds that you have to call it out. Shiloh, what was the machlekes? Because we had three different variables. We had regarding siman asl daras, we had mavrin aloichlin, and we had siman b'me'elav. And that's the question: what is the machlekes? Is the machlekes regarding siman asl daras? Is the machlekes regarding mavrin aloichlin? Or is the machlekes regarding siman b'me'elav? We had three different options, and that's what the Gemara was going around on those three different options to say that what's the possibility of the machlekes. Now the Gemara just once we mentioned Rav Zvid Mishmei Rava, so the Gemara says a very important rule. In the halachas of yiur. Amar Zid Mishmei Rava, it says, Klola davedita. The rule regarding a lost object is, even the Amar, once a person says, the owner says, Vaila lechasar kiss, woe to the loss of money, miyayish le mina. He has given up hope from it, and therefore it's already considered as hefker, the person could keep it. So that's an expression of yiur. And another teaching, Amar Zid Mishmei Rava, it says, Hilchas halacha is, that when there's these small bundles in the street, which again, this is the name of Rava, so this is like Rava had explained, if you recall from the previous daf, that is talking about when there's no siman, because when there is a siman, Rava held that even though it's asl daras, it would still be a siman. So when you find these small little bundles in the street, as we said in the Mishnah, Hadei elu shaloi, you could keep it because there's no siman. Whereas in the private domain, in someone's yard, it depends. If it looks like it fell, you can keep it because you can't say the makom is a siman because the guy doesn't know where it fell because it fell. If it's a way of being placed, then you have to take it and call it out. As Rashi explains, what are you calling out? If there's no siman, you call out the place, which is again also l'shitas of Rava. If you recall from the previous daf, that was Rava l'shitas. Makom is a siman. And siman asl daras is a siman. And Rashi explained, why don't you leave it over there? Usually we say by davar she'ein by siman, you leave it, as we'll see later on in the parak. Said Rashi, two reasons. First, maybe a guy is going to find he's going to take it. And maybe the owner forgot over there. So he's not going to remember to come back. So therefore, when you find it in a specific place, like it was put down in a private, then you're going to take it and call it out. Now, says Rava, now they're both talking about these cases that we said is when there's no siman. If it has a siman, Then it doesn't make a difference in the street. It doesn't make it in the private area. Whether it fell, whether it's put down. You'd have to call it out. As Rashi explains, Rabbi goes l'tamei according to his reasoning that he said siman as is a siman. So since it has a siman, even in the street, even when it gets stepped on, it's still going to be a siman, and therefore you have to call it out. Tim Tamid Beis, where the Mishnah said, continuing with the cases of the Mishnah, we said that umachreizus shel dagim. We said that regarding the strings of fish, which actually, if you paid attention to the slichas this morning, we said that about the Risham Yamach Shemam, that they're like machrezes shel dagim. This is, go look in the slichas that we said today, to see that that's the string of fish. That's how we should do to our enemies. Yamach Shemam b'zichram. That akapan. But if you find the string of fish, harei l'shalai, so he said that there's no siman on it, and therefore you could keep it. The Gemara says, amai, why is a string of fish not considered as a siman? Have a kesher siman. We're to look at the way they tied the knot. You obviously have to tie a knot, or else all the fish are going to come flying off of the string. So look how he tied the knot. That should be a siman. Says the Gemara, no, we're talking about kitchud tzayada. We're talking about the fisherman's knot, where the fishermen, they always tie it in a certain way in one knot. So therefore, it's not going to be an identifying feature. Everyone has it from the fisherman with the same knot. This is how everyone ties it. Okay, says okay, but I'll have a minyan siman. Let the number of fish be a siman. So the Gemara, no, but minyan the we're talking about has an equal amount of fish, which that they put onto one string. They always put a certain amount of fish, 5 or whatever it is that they do. Dozen, like a baker's dozen. They have all these numbers. It's what the fishermen have. They have their numbers, all the same. So it says the Gemara. Now, actually, this that we took for granted, the Gemara actually asks a question. Blaming them of Sheshes. As from Sheshes, minyan have a siman. Is the number a siman? Let's say could you say there was 7 or 8? Is that a siman or 11 siman? Or is that not a siman? So Rav Sheshes continues to learn in the Brisa. The Brisa says matzikli kesem. Someone finds silver vessels, the copper vessels, gister and shel aver, which are these broken pieces of lead. Any type of metal ware. You don't give it back. Actually, nice until the guy gives a sign. Or he tells you exactly the weight, and he gets exactly the number. Then you give it back to him. Oh, says the Gemara, from the fact that weight is a siman, mida uminyan, the measuring and also the numbers is also the same thing. Now we have a siman would also be a siman, and therefore we see that minyan would be a siman. Again, by the fish, it's the same number that they usually do it, and therefore it's not going to be a siman. Next case we spoke about in the Mishnah was a shtick fleish. Someone finds a slice of meat. Allah is you can keep it. So, what do you mean? The weight. That's how we sell meat. It says, well, how many ounces is it? Why shouldn't that be a siman? Says, we're talking about that the butchers. That's the way they cut the meat. It's always the same slices that you get. It wouldn't be anything identifying feature. Says, but let the cut itself. When you say which part of the animal it's from, like the dafka, which Rashi has 2 pshatim. Either he heard that it's the neck, or in the name of Ritzah Menachem, he says he heard that it's the flanks, which is where it pounds. It's doifik. When it gets worn out, the flanks are where it bangs. So it's like that's what dafik means to bang. Oy the atmor from the thigh. Why don't you say which part of the animal it's from? Tanya, didn't we learn in the Brisa? If someone finds pieces of fish, which the Gemara assumes we're talking about that there's no siman, it's just that which part of the fish it is a siman, like from the head, from the tail, should be from the reish, or the dagnashach, or a piece of fish that was already bitten into. That's it, siman. You have to call it out. Whereas, which this is not the main idea, and we'll discuss it in a second. But let's say have barrels of wine, of oil, of grain, of dried figs, of olives, and then because there's no siman over there. But one thing we see is that the piece of fish, which piece it is a siman. So why say which piece of the animal it is, which cut of meat it is, to say that it should be a siman. Says Gemara in the Hachmai Skin, what are we talking about over here? That we said that by the piece of fish you have to call it out. That's pedika simon the befaska. There's a sign in the actual cutting itself. You didn't cut the slice the way people normally cut. What does that mean? When he used to send meat to his wife through a non-Jew, so he wanted to make a siman that it was him who sent it, that it's the piece he sent, another allusion to this Yom Tov Purim. He would make the piece into 3 corners, like Rashi brings the picture, like the Hamantashen that we have over here, the Avram Yitzchak Yaakov over here, the three corners. That was how he would cut the piece of fish, and it's the way you cut it, not which cut of meat it is, but the way you cut it, and that's why. So it says actually a precise reading indicates this. The Tani that we learned, Dumi the Dag Nashach. What's the other case of the cut of fish? Is a fish that you bit into. Well, that's a siman in the cut itself. Shema Minah, that obviously that's what we mean with the cut fish. So therefore, it's not which limits from. So therefore, that's what when we're talking about the piece of meat, that's not a siman of which part of the animal it's from. It was only if you cut it an interesting way, that would be a siman, and that's what it means by the cut fish. Amamar. Now, once we mentioned the brisa, the second half, which wasn't the main point that we brought in, but once we mentioned it now, classic Talmudic style, we discussed that. Amar, the Tana of the brisa said, "Chavit shel yain, barrels of wine, b'shel shemen of oil, b'shel tvua, and grain, b'shel gregis, dried figs, b'shel zayis, and olives." Haril shalai, the halach is okay, you could keep it. Says Gemara, really? What's not? Our next mission, Daf Chafei says, "Kada yain, jugs of wine, b'kada shemen, and barrels of oil, chayv lahachis." You have to call it out that you can't keep it, but the brisa says you could keep it. Some of Zimmer says not. It's not a steer because Masnid in the Mishnah later on that holds that you have to call it out is berashim, which Rashi explains that their barrels were made out of earthenware, and right, that's the shaila. Right, it's a Gemara. Yeah, the Gemara at some places says Hainu Kad, Hainu Chavez. Yeah, the shaila is the same thing, something different. But the Gemara is assuming that for practical purposes, it's the same thing over here. That they had these barrels of earthenware, and they would seal it with an earthenware seal, and then they would, when they would cut off the top, they would seal it with clay all around to connect. That the another allusion to Purim is that the Reich Hayayin should not come out, which is interesting. Look at Rashi. He says in Shvat or Nisan is when the Balabatim sell the barrels to the stores. What happened to Adar? Shvat, he skips over Adar. He says in Shvat they sell or Nisan. I guess Adar everyone's keeping their wine for themselves or whatever. But he says in Shvat or Nisan, they sell to the stores like 10 or 15 barrels together at once, and then they take off the covers, they taste the wine, and then they have to reseal it. So, but already you cut the barrels like one piece, so that they have to now smear it all around with clay, and that's called the roishim. That's like the seal, and then the storekeeper carries it to his home. So the Mishnah is talking about a barrel that has a seal, which is a siman, because the way Rashi says, Tais says a little bit differently, says that there are those who have rishimas, because there are those who some carry it open to sell it right away, which Taisa says, or that every balabais makes his own rishima differently than the other guy. Even the maker's mark type of rishima, with the dripping down of the, everyone has their own way of sealing it. Akapanim, either way, that would be a siman. But the brisa, the Gemara asks, what? So machal the brisa emphasis the brisa says you could keep it as besuach, is that it's open? Well, that would be obvious that then the halacha. Even besuach, if it's open, that's like deliberately losing something, because if you leave it open, all types of bugs and snakes are going to come and drink from it. So that wouldn't even be a chiddush. Why would the Bryce even have to say that? So on that, the Gemara says a few approaches. Amar Rav Hoshi says, we're talking about b'meitzef. That you put the lid on it, you didn't smear it with clay. So there's no siman because you didn't put any seal on it. But it's not Aveda Medas because you didn't leave it open. You covered it, you just didn't seal it. Or Abba Yomei says, I feel you could even say Eid B'dashim. No, both are talking about the Mishnah and the Brisa is that you put a seal. But it's still not a difficulty to make a steer because the Mishnah on the Daf Chavei that says you have to call it out is Koyin Sheniftechu Eitris, is before the stores opened up. People are not selling barrels yet. One individual who did that, he has to go and now seal it. So sealing would be a siman because most people don't have a seal on yet. The Brisa says you could keep his after the store's already open. Everybody has seals now because everybody has to open up and taste it and then seal it and then open up and whatever. So therefore, it's not a steer. As the Gemara brings a story, he found the barrel of wine after the store's already open. Also came from the Abai, who Abai is the one who said this answer that we're coming to illustrate. Amalei said, Zil, go, shkol nafshach, you take it for yourself, because once the stores are open, everyone's got a seal, there's no siman over here, and therefore it's a real shalai. Now, Gemara introduced a teaching that will relate back to this brisa. Makoim, which was a machlekes Rabbi and Rav in the previous daf, he asks that as a question. Have a siman? Is place a siman, an identifying feature, or have a siman, or is not a siman? Well, he says, Tinisua, this is the brisa we just brought. Why? The brisa said, Matzah chavit shal yain, find barrels of wine, shal shem, and oil, shal buah, grain, shal greg, dried fish, shal zayis, alas. Hadei l'shallah, you could keep it. Wait a second. Visa gedaytek the makom have a siman, but if you say that where it is a siman, lechaz makom. Let the guy called out on 13th Avenue, on the corner, on 47th, on midway through the block. I found something. The guy says, "Oh, my Mont Blanc pen." So even though there's no siman, but the makom should be a siman. So why is he saying kadi shal yain harei l'shalai? So obviously makom is not a siman. So Amar says no, he rejects the proof. He says, "What are you talking about here?" But the wine came to town by the boat. They imported the wine, and the buyers clear out the boat and they leave it there on the edge of the river. And then they carry it back one by one. Sometimes they'll forget one barrel. So therefore, everyone has it over there. So that makom wouldn't be a siman. The guy says, "Oh, I found something by the port." Hello, we know that's wine. Oh, it was a bottle of wine. Good. 200 for you, right? And no, therefore that's why makom. You're right. Maybe makom would be a siman, but there it's not going to be a siman. Now, Amar Mari says, "Mike time Amar, why did Rabbi say Raks and Har Siman? Why is it that by the river edge is not a siman?" Says because Damrila, we tell him, just like it happened to you. Maybe we're not mechayshish that he's a liar, but maybe just like it happened that you forgot a barrel. He says, "Oh, I left my grogger in shul. There's 20 groggers there. That's plenty." I'm saying it's not a raya that's yours because it was there. This is where everyone leaves their stuff. Now, Ikadam, those that say Amar Mari says, "My time why did the rabbi say Mokum lahav a siman?" Which Rashi explains the nafkamina of this version of the Ikar Amri is that even if he's precise and he says the place where it was, it's not a siman. Because Damrila, we tell him, just like happens to be, maybe you had it in that place, it's not that your friend also had, and therefore just saying makom is not going to be a siman. Which Gemara brings a story related to makom. Who gava? There was a certain person, the Ashkach Kufra. He found coal or tar, the residue. It's something that does not have a siman, pitch. By the wine press. Also came in Rav, it came from the Rav. Amalei said, "Zil, shkol nafshah, go take it for yourself." Chazi davuk machasim. It says somebody could mefrek the shaila from the roof, and you see that he's not so the hard clapped. You know what I'm saying? Like losham leisachsam. Like he felt muzzled. He felt like I don't know. Really, he's a mutter. So which tamaza? It's you have to know if you felt the munas chachamim. But Amalei said to him, "Zil polik lelechia b'rei minei." Don't worry, you don't trust. You could split it with my son Chia, and no problem. And you'll see that Afil the Rebbe's Akind also is taking it, and then you don't have to worry so much. Now, says Gemara, let's say Rav holds Makim, because again, it was in a certain place. It's by the wine press. Lav a siman is not a siman. Well, even though the thing doesn't have a siman, but he could say, I found something at the wine press. Why is Rav saying Harei L'Shalai? So Rav says, no, it's no proof. Mishum Yish Baal Naga, but this story was different, that Rav knew that the owner gave up hope already, because the Chazd the Kadche Bechilfi, he saw that weeds were growing on it, says it was getting green and moldy, so obviously it was there a long time, and therefore the owner already gave up hope, and therefore he says, Harei L'Shalai. Now, we said in the Mishnah, he says that Kol Kli Ampuria, if it's a Kli Ampuria, you don't have to call it out. It says, my Ampuria, what's Ampuria? Already we're getting close to Ampuria here, Ampuria, right? I never saw anyone say that one, that rembers. But I'm going to read the Mishmur. We're going to come to a famous one in a moment. He says, Ampuria is Kalim Chadashim. These are new vessels, Shaloi Savatin Ayin, that no one, you can't be that you're that familiar with your eye visual recognition and using it to really recognize it, which Rashi says Ampuria is Nutrikin. It's the acronym of Ein Poi, either Re'iyah or Re'oya. There's no proof over here. There's no visual over here. There's nothing here that you could have recognized. It's so brand new. It's right out of from Costco, and like you could go right back, and they wouldn't even know even that you used it for 7 years, and you're giving it back. Imam is like right out of the box that you can't tell that this is yours. So that's what's saying. Okay, you find such a thing, you don't have to call it out. What's the case talking about? If there's an identifying feature, which is when your kid was bringing it, this klutz of a kid, he dropped it and there's a bang already on the corner before he even run into the house. So even though you don't have a visual recognition, who cares? There's a siman on it. And if there's no siman, so who cares that you can recognize it? If there's no siman, then there's no siman. Why is that even a point? Says the truth is, we're talking about that there is no simon. But nafkemina, the relevancy of this, if he would have savat and ayin, that you would have to call it out, is if the guy who's claiming it's his is a Talmud Chacham, is a Talmudic scholar, to give it back to a Talmud Chacham, betvius eina, with just eye recognition, as the Gemara explains. Because if it is savat and ayin, if it is that his eye could have, he's already had it in his house ready for a few weeks, and he kimle begavayu, so that he already knows about it, and Madrinle, we give it back to him even without a simon. But that's what we're saying. Kliyam Puri is kiloi savat na'ayin. Even no one can have that visual recognition. Like him, then he's not confident that it's his. But then we don't give it back to him. Who is the Talmud Chacham that we trust? That everyone has three assigned Tosfos says. But by Talmud Chacham we trust him, and therefore we'll go based on his visual recognition. Who is that? Let me read the Mishmuel. He says, if he's like this, which is only Bahani Tlas Mili, only in three things. That the rabbis, they change their words. If he only changes these three things, then he's a tzuvim rabban that we could trust, and even just with tviyas ayin, we would give it back to him. What are these three things? So the first one is b'mesechta, which is, if someone asks him, he says, did you learn mesechta gittin or not? So even though he knows it, he says, no. Which Rashi says, it's a type of humility. I Tosfos asked, the Gemara says in Kedushin that v'shenantam, the words of Torah should be sharp. If someone asks you something, you answer right away. So it says that's someone's coming to ask you a practical shayla. But if someone's coming to test you to see, if you know, you allowed to say, I didn't learn this, I didn't know this so well. So that's the only time he lies, either by mesechta, or number two, chayiv inish lebesume biparaya, which actually Rashi says paraya means is actually a reference to a bed, which is someone's asking him, did you have marital intimacy or not? Now that's not really so appropriate. Some people will ask you that, and that's a midah tznius that the Talmud Chacham, he's not going to give that answer. Tosfos actually asks a little bit differently. He says that, come on, he says like Rashi, it's not so normal for people to ask you if you had marital intimacy or not. So Tosfos doesn't like that. Tosfos asks, if he was a Balkari, he didn't come to the Beis Medrash. They say, why didn't you come to the Beis Medrash? There's no mikveh around, and he wasn't able to come to learn. So he should change it. I wasn't feeling well, or something else happened. Or let's say they asked him, did you lay down on this couch? He shouldn't say yes, because maybe they found some carry over there and that's going to be disgrace. So that's what it means, Biparaya. But everyone knows the famous Marsha. Marsha says, Biparaya means Purim, and you can lie on Purim, and it says, oh, you're drunk. Yeah. So Talmud Chacham not allowed to make believe. But Chassidus, they say Dafka, because everyone knows how great from the Baal Shem, how great that the one he asked him to get a bracha from that person in that town. The guy was shikah, and the guy was, what do you want? This guy's crazy. You can't get a bracha from him. And they finally got him, whatever. They held back the bottle. Says, oh, whatever. And the Gidei was bothered because he once did a Maisa and a grace mitzvah. And then for Shemaim, they said, whatever he says will become a koyim. And they wanted to say, he's going to say Mashiach should come. So make him drunk. And then they won't have. It says, that's what they know. That by tzaddikim, they say, yeah, they make like the mamish drunk, but the mamish clear. The Marsha says that Pabarai is a lot of lying. Say, yeah, taka, mamish ad lo yada, and like he's smiling, hugging you, and whatever. Akabanim, and the next one, the third one is ubishpiza. What's a bishpiza? So they ask him where he stayed by his host. Did they get into Genimin? Did they welcome you well? Did they give you like? And he says no. So there wasn't such a crazy Shabbos that they hosted me. That's actually a good thing, because if you say, wow, they gave unlimited food or whatever, before you know it, the people are packing into this guy's house and they're gonna use up all the money that he has, which Tosfos finds interesting. He says, because the Gemara says in Brachas Daf Nun Ches, a good guest says, wow, whatever the Baal Bais did, he did only for me. But that's fakir what we're saying over here. So Tosfos says, no, they were told by appropriate people, upstanding people. It's Asifas Rabunim. And noch Aruf fragt, oh, my gang Tazah Stut is given git, git, ungenommen. I'm saying, but by people that maybe that's, I don't know, that might be the other category. So, but people that not moganim, then you attack, then you change already. Then you say that attacker wasn't. They didn't. Then initially when azak grace azak. Either way, as it says, what's the difference to know that these are the only three things that he changes? So Amarzut says for this halacha, to give him back a lost object with just eye recognition. Even though he doesn't change, he always says the emes. Only these three things he changes from the truth. Then we would give it back to him just with Tviyas Ein. But if under the Zachen he doesn't say the total truth, then we wouldn't give it back to him. As the Gemara illustrates, ending off this conversation regarding even a Talmid Chacham, even Yeshiva man, if he says total truth, Mazrucha Chasida, Mazrucha the pious one, Ignav lekasa de kaspa mirshpiza. The place where he was staying, the host had a silver becher stolen from his host. So he saw that there was a yeshiva man. The Moshe Yodeh, he washed his hands. So he's looking in Nebuch, he's looking, his hand is his nas, is his hands, he's looking for something, and he sees his friend's towel over there, his friend's shirt, and he dries his hand in his friend's shirt. He says, Hi no hi, this is the Ganav. He doesn't care about his friend's money. He's using his friend's towel, his friend's shirt to dry his hands. Kafte, they bound him, and admitted, and that's where we see that if he's a younger man, but he doesn't say emes, then you don't get it back. But as we're saying, Kalyan Purya, no one could do it. Even the Talmid Chacham, it's no eye recognition. But if there would be, then you would give back Talmid Chacham who doesn't lie except for these three things of Masechta, Purya, and Ushpiza. Thank you to anything for hosting us.